What if I told you that Death Stranding has a Lovecraftian vibe in its universe? I'm fascinated by cosmic horror, especially how it emphasizes the unknown and our insignificance in the face of immense and incomprehensible things. This interest grew significantly with Bloodborne, with creatures like the Moon Presence or the Amygdala, which are hard to describe from a human perspective and nearly invisible to the sane, only visible to the most disturbed. This is reflected in the game's mechanics. In Death Stranding, thankfully, we don't need to lose our sanity to sense the BTS, also known as beached things or beach entities. They're made of antimatter, extremely dangerous and hostile to any living being, capable of destroying entire cities, but only perceptible to those connected to the beyond or encapsulated babies. At first, I thought they would just be ghosts with little variety, which isn't entirely untrue. But when I was caught by one for the first time, I realized it was something much more serious. So I started to wonder if that had any resemblance to the popular cosmic horror of H.P. Lovecraft's works. After doing some research on forums and discussing it with you guys in the channel community, I found out I wasn't the only one with that impression. Motivated by you all, I decided to study more about these creatures to bring a video exclusively dedicated to them. Later on, I can make another video to discuss the game itself, but for now, I'd like to focus on the EPS. And since the release of Death Stranding 2 is approaching, I don't even need to say that this video will contain spoilers, right? So be warned. To better understand the BTS, it's important to delve into some related aspects, as they are intricately linked to various concepts within the game world, especially those involving the afterlife and its influence on the living world. In Death Stranding, this theme is central. In the game, people take refuge in shelters, unable to venture out, due to the presence of invisible creatures and other phenomena, such as timefall rain, which ages everything it touches. Additionally, exposure to a substance called chiral has the potential to induce suicidal impulses, something humanity seeks to avoid at all costs. However, it wasn't always like this. Before the event, society lived without problems, but with the onset of the phenomenon known as Death Stranding, civilization began to decline drastically, isolating people from one another. This event has occurred at least 5 times throughout Earth's history and is directly related to past mass extinctions, such as that of the dinosaurs, for example. This correlation is supported by research by Hartman and other scientists who have identified the presence of extinction entities and the spread of chiralium during these events. Extinction entities are living beings that play a crucial role in Death Stranding events, causing catastrophes simply by existing. Throughout human history, at least 5 of them have inhabited the Earth. They are not strange beings, but common ones, like a dinosaur, a mammoth, or an ancestral human. And they all have something in common: umbilical cords connected to their bodies. In the game, we are traversing the 6th Death Stranding, which began on the island of Manhattan. It all started when a surgeon performed a cesarean section on a woman who was brain dead, triggering the emergence of a ghost entity, BTs. This BTs consumed the surgeon and caused a massive explosion, vaporizing an area the size of an entire city and leaving behind a crater. But how exactly does a BTs come to be? Well, within the game universe, a living being consists of 2 aspects: the physical body, called HA, and its soul, called KA. When the HA dies, the KA detaches from the body and seeks to cross what the game calls the beach to reach the beyond, whose nature is unknown. We don't know if there is anything there or if it's just an infinite void. The only certainty is that there's a threshold between the 2 worlds, and this so-called beach lies exactly in the middle. Beaches are, in simplified terms, bridges to the afterlife, assuming different forms for each human being. However, it's possible for someone not to be able to cross this beach. And if the corpse isn't cremated, the HA will return to the KA, turning into a BTS and posing the risk of obliteration. Most of the time, the BTS we encounter in the game take the form of adult humans, or babies at least a year old. However, it's not clear whether the other types of BTS we'll encounter later are unique beings that inhabit the previously unknown side, or if there's some kind of deformity or strange blend of human souls. Nonetheless, The observers are the type of BT that we can safely say are human souls, although they are less akin to the cosmic horror idea I had in mind. Essentially, they are human souls, but there's still a connection to Lovecraftian tales. These observers always manifest in areas with timefall rain and can be easily identified from a distance by a black cord descending from the sky to near the ground, revealing their location. Their presence can interfere with anything using energy, such as lights, vehicles, and equipment, and they're extremely aggressive, attacking anything nearby that makes noise, as they can't see, only hear. To pass unnoticed by them, players can hold their breath or crouch walk, or do both at the same time, which helps reduce the chance of detection. Additionally, thanks to Baby Lou, you can know their positions to protect yourself from these beings. Sam can also use blood-infused grenades with his own blood, possessing anti-BTS properties, to banish the creatures temporarily, or you can cut the umbilical cord that keeps them connected to eliminate their link to the world of the living. There are other variations, like the red BTs, that can only be killed with blood bullets, or by cutting their cords with handcuffs. The white ones, which I've only seen appear when there's some obstruction blocking an NPC's path, and the giants, which are 2 to 4 times the size of a normal BT and much more resistant. If a GE detects you, it immediately moves towards the sound indicated by black palm prints appearing on the ground as if it's walking. And if those palms catch up to you, you're in trouble. This creature reminds me a lot of an H.P. Lovecraft story called The Dunwich Horror, which portrays an invisible creature that grows in size throughout the story, eventually becoming large enough to attack the town where the story takes place. The invisible being not only resembles the BTs by being invisible, but also leaves marks wherever it goes, much like the black liquid handprints we see in the game. In fact, in the same story, even the timefall rain could be a parallel, as the caretaker attacked by the creature is described as an adult but is actually 10 years old. It's not a direct resemblance to the rain that ages everything it touches, but it shares some characteristics that somehow align. In another story called From Beyond, there are invisible creatures that can only be perceived if a person has special abilities, which also brings to mind the BTs, which can only have their locations revealed by those with dooms or connected babies. And in this world, not everyone has these abilities, which is why humanity becomes secluded in Death Stranding. When you're caught by a BT, a large pool of black, viscous liquid like tar forms around you. Several other BTs emerge from the pool, attempting to pull you in. Up to this point, you can still escape in the game, but if you fail, you'll be dragged down and the pool will turn into a lake of tar. From this dark and dense substance emerges a completely different creature, known as a Catcher. It's unclear exactly where these deformed beings come from, whether they're a mix of normal BTs or inhabitants of some mysterious afterlife, about which little is known. This uncertainty already evokes a sense of cosmic horror, the fear of the unknown beyond what we know. The appearance of these creatures also contributes to this feeling, with bodies seemingly composed of tar and oily tentacles in place of heads, where a huge mouth in the form of an orifice is hidden. There are 4 variations of Catchers: the Bados, resembling dolphins, and the Zako, quadrupedal monsters, considered the weakest. The other 2 variations are stronger versions of the former, characterized by golden masks on their faces and greater resistance. They manifest only once due to the Higgs, the game's antagonist, who has control over the BTs. If a Catcher catches you, the antimatter within your bodies will meet with SAMs, causing the dreaded obliteration. These creatures can always arise from normal BTs, but there are others that appear at specific moments throughout the game. They are not summoned like the jellyfish that float statically in key locations and can explode upon contact, but fortunately, they do not cause obliteration. There even exists a golden variant of them that splits into 2 when destroyed. One of the most impressive, undoubtedly, is the one they call the Whale. Although that is not its official name. They are huge, capable of flying, and can shoot lasers from their mouths, which open in 3 parts, revealing a grotesque interior that doesn't seem to be made only of tar. Additionally, they summon golden BTs that can obliterate much more easily. So far, we see that many of these creatures have no direct connection to human souls, but they do have some connection to marine life, either by name like quadruped called small fish, or by their own physiognomy. This makes me wonder, what exactly is the afterlife of which we know so little? Could the afterlife be the deep sea? Considering that to reach this spiritual plane, people need to cross the beach to the sea. These are just theories. I could be very wrong, but if there's any truth to it, the fear of the unknown can be explored through the depth of the waters of this spiritual sea and the terrors that await at its bottom, since whales and dolphins could be just a small part of it. And here, I also want to draw another parallel with Lovecraft's tales like the story Dagon, where we see a direct influence on Kojima's work. It presents us with a passage from the book, depicting the same sea of black viscous mud, where fish carcasses and other less recognizable animals decompose on the beach. The creatures themselves draw a parallel with the visual design of Cthulhu, which, by the way, has a Metallica song called The Call of Cthulhu from the 1984 album Ride the Lightning. There's also a bit of the marine creatures from tales like The Shadow over Innsmouth, which doesn't specifically mention deformed animals but shares the same theme with the whole issue of people having connections with humanoid amphibians called Deep Ones. But getting back to the topic of the animalistic BTs in Death Stranding, there's one exception that doesn't fit into this issue, which is the colossal BT that we glimpse briefly at the beginning of the game and face in Edge Knot City at the end of the campaign. It's not, in this logic, a natural being from this mysterious plane, but an artificial creation of Higgs, who, as mentioned before, can control BTs. This one takes on a humanoid form, capable of summoning other BTs from itself and using an attractive force to grab and devour living beings, potentially causing obliteration, which is a massive explosion. It also has tentacles in place of a head, and can create strands from its arms to grab Sam during the final battle against it. Now imagine all of this from the perspective of an ordinary human without dooms or a baby to help. Terror would lurk without any ceremony. That's more than enough to explain why humanity has locked itself away from everything and everyone, and only those who can truly deal with these beings roam around. The Lovecraftian influence throughout the video can be perceived through the unknown of the afterlife, creatures that not even us players fully understand, and their appearance linked to marine life, a theme that occasionally connects to Lovecraft's works. And speaking of which, we can draw another parallel with Clifford Unger, one of the characters in the game, and the tale The Mound. In this story, a civilization living underground used undead slaves, mentally controlled and indefinitely animated, to perform any task given to them. This civilization was named Kan Yan, and besides being able to reanimate and control the dead, they could also materialize and dematerialize any object they wished, reducing them to mere particles and reassembling them back to their normal form. These abilities bear some resemblance to Mads Mikkelsen's character, don't you think? In the game, we can see his weapons and accessories dematerializing. Additionally, the Kan Yan, despite being so advanced in this regard, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, which, given the context of Death Stranding, draws a connection to Cliff's military attire and the undead he controls. These can be considered old-fashioned in the game's world, where technology is extremely advanced, and the character's clothing is drawn from the context of the First and Second World Wars, which are considered ancient times within the game's context. One last curiosity I'd like to share is that Death Stranding could have potentially included several other BT within the game, but they remained confined to the initial concepts. These concept creatures show that Kojima's team had even more terrifying ideas in mind before the game's inception, perhaps even more grotesque than what we currently have. Ideas that aimed to create something more abstract, but later shifted towards bringing something based on dead animals, seeking to create something convincing and more frightening. Honestly, I found the abstract ideas quite interesting. They seem more creative, free-spirited. Who knows? Maybe we'll see something similar in the game's sequel, you never know. Everything I've said about Lovecraft's influence on the work may or may not actually be true. And of course, I'm just a curious guy who decided to research a bit about the mythology of Death Stranding to try to justify how I saw cosmic horror in the work. Much is said about the game's gameplay being a walking simulator, but little is said about this fantastic part of its universe, which is undoubtedly much more interesting to discuss and should receive the attention it deserves. If you disagree with something, have something to comment on, or especially if someone knows a lot about the game's lore and sees something poorly explained or something that should have been commented on, please feel free to leave your comment. As mentioned in the community tab, we've finally broken the ice and discussed a Kojima work here again. Anyway, thank you very much to everyone who watched this far. Take care, and until the next opportunity.
It's time for you to hit the road and start a new journey.